I'm Lee Moore.
I'm Rob Moore.
And this is the Chinese Literature Podcast, and we have a guest with us today.
We do. This is exciting. We don't get a chance to interview many writers. We've interviewed a few translators. This is a little different.
This is, I think, the first time we've interviewed a writer. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Yang Huang. Yang Huang?
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rob and Lee. I love your podcast.
That's an advertisement, but it was an honest one. We didn't put her up to it.
What we're looking at today, so this is your second published work, is that correct?
Yes. It's my debut work.
Okay.
The first collection I wrote.
So the collection is called My Old Faithful, and it is now out, available on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at other reputable booksellers. Could you tell us a little bit about the work? I'm kind of interested. How did you come to write this? It's a story of family, very everyday kind of story, but story kind of builds up and it means something. So what kind of made you want to write this story?
Well, family is a perennial subject with intimate and resolved issues. I modeled these stories on my family and other families I knew during my teen years. We used to live in a community of 6 apartment buildings. The residents were professors and staff's family at Yangzhou Teachers College. My parents, like all Chinese parents, compared my brother and me to our schoolmates who excelled in studies or had special talents. It was normal for us to have anxiety and feel inadequate. Finally, I could write about these people who made my teen years difficult. It was gratifying to dissect a character from every angle in a way that I couldn't do to a real person. I was drawn to the moments of weakness when an outwardly decent person makes a bad decision. Working through this collection gave me valuable insights about the family life with adolescents. My children are teenagers now. I found those experiences a helpful reminder that each generation has to find their way. As your child transforms from a caterpillar to a butterfly overnight.
It's interesting. I'm glad you say all that because I just had my first son a year and a half ago. He's 18 months old now. And there were thank you. This is the kind of work where I think if I'd read it before being a parent, I would have enjoyed it. But reading it as a parent, it especially the character of the father in this, there's so many points, especially early on in the collection when the father is spanking his son because he's just so frustrated. He just, why do you keep doing this? And he just can't stop himself. I find myself reading that and thinking, I think I could possibly do that one day. You just sort of snap, you know? Lee started off by asking what made you want to write this. I'm curious, is this a blend of, say, autobiography and other people's experiences, or is this just all the stuff in the book are things that you observed in your own life?
I have to say, most of the events are fictional, but the people and place are real in the sense that composites. I put a person's head on another person's body with third person's mouth. So the character, it feels more realistic and forceful in the short story.
I had a question about your choice of narration. Yeah. So one of the coolest things about this set of stories is they're told first by first person narrators, but each story is told by a different narrator. And you mentioned that. I mean, at the beginning of each story, it says like the daughter or the father or something like that. That's a really interesting way to tell a story. I don't know that. I'm sure I've read some other stories like that, but that's very unique, and I thought it was one of the more compelling parts of reading this. Why? How did you come up with that? Why did you choose that? What were you trying to do with that?
Yeah, we all know proverbs like, a wise judge cannot settle a family dispute. We don't always care who is right, who is wrong in the family. That might be irrelevant. A lot of times people want to express their emotions or just discover themselves. So I construct this fictional family with a father, mother, 2 daughters, and son. Each person tells 2 stories, and they're peripheral characters in other people's stories. The characters are honest with themselves when they are away from other people's watchful eyes. This authenticity is something that other families don't see in the interactions. So by juxtaposing those different perspectives, readers can see how skewed the character's point of views are. For example, the father doesn't know how insightful his wayward son is. Just when you think he gets the last word, other people will trump you with a fresh perspectives. This keeps the story from going down a well-worn path. And there's a certain balance of power. No one controls the outcome because characters have free wills. Most of the time, people don't act on rash impulses that result in melodrama. Instead, they make choices that show their internal drama.
I really like the way you ended that, because you used the word melodrama. And if I had to pick a word to describe what this book is not, I would say melodramatic. And I say that in a good way. There were so many points in this collection when something would happen and I would think, oh, I see where this is going. Like the episode in the pool between the brother and the daughter, I think, oh, I see. This is going to sort of spiral down into this hideous, traumatic event, which is fairly frequent in modern fiction, but it doesn't. The characters are honest with themselves, and I think because it's first person, I think you're right. There is a balance of power there. So instead of having one person just tell us what everyone else is doing and thinking, we get to see a little bit of everybody. Was it conscious on your part to not want things to be much, much darker and much more dramatic? A lot of the drama in the book is very, I use the word normal as a compliment here because I found it very relatable. Did you make a conscious decision not to let things spiral down too far?
I think I do because I have a background in engineering. So I have a little bit rather optimistic worldview. I like to think people have your destiny is in your own hands. So in the story of this younger sister, she fights back against her brother's molestation and chooses not to tell her parents. She moves past this betrayal and befriends a boy outside home and even has a crush on her high jump coach. This spirited young woman is not a victim, but makes her way toward a new life. She goes to the U.S. and brings a brown man home to meet her conservative parents. For these people, sexuality, it's about growing up, growing old, losing and finding yourself. I, like to tackle social problems in my fiction, put my characters to the test, let them endure. In the darkest, most despairing hours, let them use their ingenuity, kind of like engineer, find some sort of relief or solution. Not to break my characters, because I think people are resilient and powerful. Even as being fragile human beings, they could get shaken up a little, but essentially not broken. That's how I view world and literature and life. Meaning of literature.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in here with this because my favorite thing about this collection, Lee and I have talked about this a lot with post-cultural revolution literature. This is one of the only things I've read in sort of post-cultural revolution Chinese literature that is not terribly violent, graphic, incredibly dark fiction.
It's just a normal story, right? It's a normal family.
Yeah, it's a normal family, and I find that so compelling because a lot of Western publishers, they're trying to find this sort of dissident political literature. That's what's going to sell. Even on the back of your book, your bio just starts off by saying, Huang grew up in China's Jiangsu province and participated in the 1989 student uprisings. The reason that's peculiar is because knowing that, none of that stuff is in the book. I mean, the 89 student uprisings are mentioned, but it's not a key part of the book. And I was wondering this all the way through the book. Were you intentionally sort of writing against the grain of a lot of this post-cultural revolution fiction in presenting just a normal family? Or were you not even thinking that and you just wanted to tell a story like this?
I think it's both. I'm always a little bit turned off by overtly political writing because I grew up with propaganda. I really could not stomach too much of that anymore. I just rebelled against that kind of tradition by reading foreign literature in translation. I read French novels in translation, given they were actually about the French Revolution. But I was drawn to their personal stories. I never read literature just to study history. That's not. I want to study humans. So I was drawn to people acting like real normal people, even under tremendous political pressure in political turmoil. So I was aware that these families lived in an era of economic and technological reform in China. So a lot of things are changing. At the end of the day, still just family try to raise their children, to make them good people, good, capable, hardworking people. So that's enough for a family to face in that struggle. And I consider those struggles are more real and will have a lasting impact on the family and how they're going to move forward and pass down generations. I don't think the political things will just disappear with years. So I want to write something with lasting value that is more important to me.
It almost sounds like because that's how I see some of your writing as related to Zhang Ailing and like her rejection of politics and just writing about kind of I don't want to say she doesn't write about normal situations, but she does reject politics in a lot of ways. Are you drawing off of Zhang Ailing at all in your thinking about literature?
I have to thank your podcast for introducing me to Zhang Ailing again. Someone recommended her to me. She was not a popular writer in mainland China. Actually, I think her work was censored for quite many years. Now I begin to read her work, and I was just quite taken with it. I guess writers were born with some kind of sentiment, They're drawn to the things that are important to them. This is kind of temperaments that they don't know why they're drawn to those things, but they just have to follow their heart. Now I'm reading her work. I'm reading her novel, Ban Shen Yuan. I am so grateful to have found her because I used to read Jane Austen.
I love Ban Shen Yuan.
I think Jane Austen's work even more focused on social, economic forces. But Zhang Ailing is so focused on romance. I have so much to learn from her work.
I have to say that that's both good and bad. Good in the sense that we're glad the podcast is reaching people. Bad in the sense that because you're now jumping on the Zhang Ailing bandwagon, it's provingly correct, and that's unacceptable, I think.
Are you writing for your children, it sounds like? You said you've got children kind of growing up right now. Are you writing? When you write, are you thinking that they'll read this and that it will change them and make them into the kind of person who you want to be? Is that?
No, I wrote for myself.
Okay.
I always wrote for myself, and my children were not born when I wrote this collection. I think this is the only way to write for yourself. But I want to write something that I want to read 20 years from now. I don't want to write about the headlines or the most pressing political issues because, in a way, those things kind of like noise. You want to find some kind of peace and something that with lasting value that's intensely personal and important to your growth, to finding yourself in this world. And these are not the political headlines.
Well, can I ask, I was curious because you mentioned that this is the first collection you wrote, though it doesn't seem like the first collection you published. Biographically, did you write this when you had been in the U.S. for a while, or did you write it when you were moving back and forth? Like, where does this occur in your life?
8 years after I came to the U.S.
So there was a little bit of distance between those experiences and when you started writing.
Yes. And I moved the city of residence from Yangzhou to Nanjing to create a distance. I don't want it to be about my life. I want it to be about art. And this way I have to construct a world from ground up. And this requires more commitment on my part. I find it difficult to write about my own life.
Yeah, that's hard. Lee and I have talked about this. Lee does a lot more writing than I do right now.
Rob and I are both aspiring writers, though we're both bad.
It's going to be a while before.
So we admire you a lot.
Yeah. But we talked about this, though. It's very, very hard to write yourself. I worked on a piece of fiction for a long time where I was the central character and it went nowhere. And it didn't get interesting until I just made somebody else the central character, and then it got a lot easier. And that's why, to come back to an earlier point, it's interesting knowing that, that writing yourself is hard, that you've still chosen the first-person voice, which technically should be someone writing themselves, but it's from many, many different perspectives. Did you find that made it easier to write the story when you could say I, but it was many different I's?
Yes, that's actually how I fictionalized these people. For the first story, Pine in Yellow, I read 20 nonfiction books on dogs and watched dog-themed films.
Wow.
Most of the material wasn't used in story, but I was able to construct a fictional world in my mind where story takes place. Then I inhabit that space and lived his story. The voice came when I became the character. The plot emerged organically out of a nonfiction material, so it felt like a real life I had lived. I didn't have to force the characters to act in a certain way. Eventually, they revealed themselves to me. So the fact that I use the I in all these stories is my commitment to fictionalize these events.
Yeah. And we're going to start winding things down here. I keep coming back to this point because I lived in China for almost 10 years. And the thing that moved me the most about this collection is that these are people I have met. When I read a lot of the more famous post-cultural revolution work, Yan Lianke and Mo Yan, it's really fascinating. But I have no connection there at all. It's so distant from me.
It's nothing that you ever see in real life.
Or will ever see. The first time I went to China, I was sort of hoping to meet the sort of political dissident China. And then I was there 9 or 10 years, and I realized the vast majority of people are actually exactly like the people in this book. You don't have a 2-hour film about the fact that the youngest daughter brings an Indian man home to meet her parents. But the parents are like, okay. And that's it, which the people I met, that's how they would have reacted, right? Oh, he's a man. He's got a good job. He's nice. All right, that's enough. I'm going to kind of finish my comments on the book with that you need to read this book to understand really what I would think the vast majority of people in the cities in China are like. They're like this. They're like you were saying. They're trying to just raise kids in a healthy way. They want them to be successful and to be happy, and there's a lot of beauty in that sort of seeming normalcy.
Yeah, I guess I think that's a pretty good place where we're at right now. Yang Huang, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. I have to say, the type of a kind of like a melodramatic, allegorical fiction by Mo Yan and Yan, I have not read Yan Lianke, is partly caused by the censorship, because you cannot write life as it is, or you may touch a sensitive nerve on the political censorship. So this is how they write in allegory, and it's just kind of like a puzzle. You have to put the puzzle together, and that's why I turned to write in English, because I don't want to have to disguise my true motives. I just want to tell ordinary stories. And I want to elude that the struggle against the government. So I wrote it in English. And I admire all the writers in China try to be honest and try to survive in that kind of environment.
I think that's a great final thought. If that's okay, is it okay if we end it there?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being on. This has been a really great interview, and thank you for being the first writer that we actually get to talk with. You're actually making this literature, and that's really cool.
Thank you so much. I feel truly honored because you talking about those iconic authors. What you asked me about.
You'll be among them someday. And to all the people listening, you really need to find this collection, My Old Faithful. It's out for the University of Massachusetts Press. You can find it through Amazon, other places. I'm going to make at least my wife and my mom read it because I know they'll like it, and you all will too. So we're going to stop there with that recommendation.
I'm Lee Moore.
Thank you, Rob.
I'm Rob Moore.
And this is the Chinese Literature Podcast. Thank you, Yang Huang.